Hello, welcome to Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. I am Robert, the narrator, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Confessions. This is episode number 24. Can an RPG dictate style or immersion? I was listening to some YouTube channels and live chats, as I do, and they, at least peripherally, talked about this idea of systems forcing you into a certain style of play or not reinforcing a certain style or hurting immersion. And I had some opinions on that, so I thought that I would do this episode. I don't remember all of the channels or all of the live chats that made me come up with the idea for this episode, so I won't mention any of them. I'll just go ahead and address the topics. Can a game force you into a certain style of play or force you in and out of immersion? I'm going to answer the question first, and then I'm going to explain my reason for the answer. No, I don't think an RPG system can force a certain style of play or dictate immersion. I have criticized Dungeons and Dragons in the past. You know what? I don't want to say criticize. I just stated the fact that Dungeons and Dragons throughout its history has been heavily focused on combat, and a lot of the rewards that you get are combat based. But I've always said, or at least I have tried to always say, you can do whatever you want with Dungeons and Dragons. Though it encourages combat, you don't have to play it in that fashion. And if a group wanted to, they could play Pathfinder even though they wanted to do all RP. Now, I would question why you would play such a rules-heavy game if all you wanted to do is role play, but you could do it. There's nothing stopping you from doing so. I'm probably biased because I don't have any biases. I think RP is just as important as mechanics and combat. And I never want to forget that I'm playing a game for that reason. I think both are equally important. So when someone says that the mechanics of a game force them out of immersion, I say, so what you're saying is the game reminded you that you were playing a game. For me, that doesn't particularly compute. When I play a role-playing game, I'm there for the role-playing and I'm there for the game. And now, there is something to be said for a GM being in tune with the moment and knowing when to stay in RP or to invoke the rules. Even though my opinion is you can do whatever you want with any RPG, you can play it how you want, but there definitely can be times when a GM is not in tune with the moment and may call for a role when the group is really feeling staying immersed and staying in characters and role playing, or vice versa, calling for role playing when the group wants to really do combat. But again, that's not a game issue. I think that is a communication issue and also a GM issue. It takes a really good GM to be in tune with their players, be in tune with the moment, and know what the players feel that, the moment calls for. When I say this kind of thing is a GM issue, no matter what game you're playing, if the GM calls for rolls every 2 seconds for every little thing, that will take you out of immersion. Like a high percentage of issues that occur when you're trying to play an RPG, this problem can be resolved with communication. If the GM and players determining how much RP they want and how much combat they want, forced play styles and immersion issues can easily be solved. If you just sit down and talk about it and be honest, you can prevent the issues of being pulled out of immersion or being forced into a certain style of play that you don't enjoy. Because RPG systems are tools. Like a hammer, if you pick up a hammer and hit someone with it, you can't say that the hammer made you do it. Even though a hammer is perfectly balanced for hitting things, you can't blame that on the hammer. Role-playing game can be used for good or it can be used for evil. Mark Rosewater, who is the head designer for Magic the Gathering, the collectible card game, I was listening to one of his podcasts. He was talking about design, and he said something that I really agree with. He said that players who are playing a game that promotes a particular type of strategy as optimal, those players will use those strategies even if those strategies are not fun. And it's like complexity blaming, which I talked about a couple of episodes ago. Essentially, complexity blaming is when a player who wants a certain level of rules heftiness sees other players enjoying kind of the next level up of rules heaviness and decides to try that next level up. They don't enjoy it, and then they blame the game or the game master. It's kind of the same idea. My feeling about that is, I don't want to be too blunt here, but if that happens, that is the player's fault. That, again, is not the game's fault. If you are immersed in the game and you're playing your character and then something presents itself and you know that the way to respond to it is by using a particular rule in the game or a particular strategy, and that pulls you out of immersion, that's your fault. Because though I enjoy RP and I enjoy mechanics, I'm never going to do something in the game just because it's optimal and then blame the game because I got pulled out of immersion. I think that the game itself has to fit everyone's expectation and has to be enjoyable. That's always. But I don't think that some of these things can be blamed on the game at all. As far as a game promoting a particular style or giving you a particular feeling, to be honest with you, unless the game was built to simulate a genre and is incredibly narrowly focused, like a game that is a single genre game, like say Mutant Year Zero or Call of Cthulhu, I can't say that I've ever played a game and walked away feeling like, wow, those mechanics really made me feel like I was immersed and it forced me to play in a style that really reinforced the genre. Again, unless the game was a single genre, hyper-focused game like Call of Cthulhu or Mutant Year Zero, I generally don't look for the mechanics to immerse me in the world. The system can reinforce style F the game. I think if the game is a super narrowly focused game, but otherwise, I can't recall playing games and the system being such that I was like, oh my God, it really felt like supers. The mechanics were there and they worked, and they had rules for things that they should have rules for unless the game was super flawed. And I kind of just play it. How do you feel about this? Do you feel that a system can force you out of immersion, or do you believe that all of this is really up to the game master or the players? Well, thank you for joining me for this episode of Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. Please, I love to hear from you guys, so you can put comments down below. Let me know what you think. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.